So, my name is Tim. I've been riding for a little over 4 years now. Um, Mainly sticking to like around the Portland, Vancouver area. The first skate park I ever went to was Pacific Community Park in Vancouver, and I had like a cheap Walmart bike there, and I was sort of one of the skaters was giving me tips on like carving in the bowl. So I was practicing that in the smaller 7.5 foot bowl and just like cruising around that bowl, and I was getting some decent speed, and then I set myself up really awkwardly for the carve on the outer side of that full pipe and ended up going straight. I had to bail off the bike. I tried to catch it by the seat and it flew like 3 or 4 feet in the air and nosedived right into the full pipe. Snapped that front axle in 3 pieces. So I ended up throwing that Walmart bike out. About 2.5 months later, I was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace and saw somebody had listed a 2008 Sabrosa for sale for $100. I'm like, I've heard of Sabrosa. They're an okay brand. They're an actual BMX brand. At that time, I was hearing some stuff about like frame issues and not being like full chromoly frames, but I mean, it was a inexpensive BMX bike. I picked it up and rode that for like almost a year or a little over a year, and I mean, a lot of the tricks I learned in that time frame were like a lot of like double tire ride stuff, little small like stuff that I could do on flat ground. I learned 180s on that bike, and I learned how to roll into balls on that bike, and that bike pretty much set me up good for like being able to go to the skate park and not having to worry about my bike breaking like that Walmart bike did. So, and what was really interesting about that one is it had a 14mm front axle. So I was a lot less worried about snapping the axle in 3 pieces like I had on that Walmart bike. And I went to Battleground Skate Park about 4 months after, 4 months after the 1 year after getting that bike. Went to Battleground Skate Park for the first time, was messing around in the bowl, went to fly out of the little 4-foot that's on the, so there's like that hip, and I went to fly out of that 4-foot and nosedived pretty hard, bent the forks. So I ended up putting the forks from one of my older bikes. It was the forks off of a Specialized. Put those on there, rode it for a while, probably about 3 months without those forks. Those ended up bending as well, but they didn't bend as extreme as the stock Sabrosa forks that were on that bike. About 2 months after that, I decided I wanted to get a little bit of a bigger frame because the Sabrosa was a 20.5 inch top tube, and so I went back to Facebook Marketplace, started scrolling, found this 2011 Premium Duo. It was all like, had different forks on it, had different wheels, different bars. I'm pretty sure it had some, like the bars that were on there were definitely mid-school bar. They were a lot shorter, they were a bit narrower. They weren't like the big 9.5 inch rise that you see today. They were, I think, 7 3/4 inch rise bars. They were pretty short. But I also had a front load stem instead of a top load, so they were sitting a little lower as well. Rode that for like 8 months. Ended up putting a Shadow Interlock V2 chain on there because I was snapping chains left and right, and one of my buddies gave me his Interlock V2, and rode that chain, never had any issues with it. This bike had didn't have a sealed headset. It had a a standard bearing and cage headset. I remember having a lot of issues with that, whereas the Subrosa that I had prior was a sealed headset, sealed bottom bracket. It's about 8 months goes by, I'm sort of having issues with the bike. The headset races ended up pitting out. I ended up getting rid of that frame and specialized frame that I had. And one of my buddies, Shane, he's like, he and I were at the skate park that day. He was like, I mean, I've got a old Fit for $100. I'm like, cool, I'll take it. So we go over to his house, get the Fit frame. It's got 4X bars stem on it, but it didn't have a seat, didn't have cranks, didn't have pedals. I put my wheels from the Subrosa on there. Not the rear wheel from the Subrosa. I had to use a different front wheel because it had the 3/8 dropout in the fork. So rode that one for 6 to 8 months before I left for basic training. This was in March of 2020. I left for basic training for the Army, and then as I was in basic training in AIT, some of the money that I was earning through that I put into my next bike, which was a custom built S&M Dagger with the majority of the parts were Primo parts, RC rims, and it had the planetary coaster that had the Free Night, the original, the first big planetary coaster. When I got back from training, I put it all together, ran that for about a year before I got it powder coated with Corey, and once it was powder coated, I swapped out the cranks. I put brakes on it, taller bars, and new grips, new tires. Rode that for about 6 months with the brakes. Throughout that time, I learned tire taps on like banks, sort of just like smaller brake tricks, nothing crazy. About 6 months after that, I decided I wanted to get more of a mellow street setup. So I ended up getting the Subrosa, or not the Sunday EX, Eric Elstern signature. Because I fell in love with that, the gloss black with the copper splatter on it. And to this day I'm running that bike. I've swapped out, when I bought it, I swapped out the bars, added pegs, and took the brakes off. Swapped the front wheel from my S&M setup onto the Sunday. That front wheel was a Primo flangeless front hub on the RC Heiser light. And I've been running like that since. Up until this week, I was running the stock Sunday tires on there. Before coming out here to Boise for this job that I'm in, I visited Boise in, I want to say June or April, May, like right at the beginning of summer, to ride roads and check that out. Checked out Fort Boise as well. Fell in love with those two parks, and now I'm here for longer term, and been riding more skate parks, meeting more people, making more friends, and feeling more confident on the bike. And so that's sort of the story of, that's sort of my BMX story getting up into today.
That sounds more like your bicycle story, like what your bikes are. That doesn't really say your BMX story. And those are two different things. Like, yeah, I mean, like, we all go through bikes and bike parts, but like, you're not saying anything about you and about what this journey has done for you, who you ride with, why you ride with those people, what your goals are in BMX. Why don't you tell me your ideal goals in riding BMX now, and how you are getting there, and what you're doing to get there, and what's your mindset about getting there?
So like initially what got me into BMX was watching X Games. Whenever I'd visit my grandparents' house when I was like 12, 13 years old, they'd put on stuff like Monster Jam, X Games, stuff along those lines, some of the extreme sports, motorsports type of stuff, because they knew I was entertained by that. And watching X Games, I was primarily focusing on like the main people I enjoyed watching were Scotty Kramer, Dave Mira, and watching those people do all these big tricks. I was like, I want to do that someday. And then when I finally got into riding BMX, I was riding with a lot of the Vancouver locals like Rico, Jimmy, some of the guys that haven't really ridden as much lately. I was in a little group chat, about 6 or 7 of us. We would ride like downtown Vancouver, sort of just have a good time. Learned quite a few tricks from them. They helped me sort of develop this mindset for like trying to improve myself instead of just staying where I was at. And I found a lot of improvement riding with those people. When I left for training, I sort of lost contact with those people. They eventually stopped riding. But when I came back, I was riding a lot with like a lot of the Vancouver locals that were still riding, like Rico, and then Cooper had started riding. Just sort of riding like the smaller skate parks with good street sections like Battleground. And we were all in it for having a good time, having just about all of my riding groups more focused on having a good time rather than sending crazy tricks. Put me in a good mindset of a hobby and pastime. And eventually I like a little bit break from BMX because I was sort of just not feeling any improvement. But after I think it was like a couple months, I hit Cooper up again. We started riding, and I was learning a few new tricks left and right, and started gaining that confidence in my riding again. A lot of what I've been wanting to keep doing is keep growing this community that I'm riding with, and I want to be able to put myself out there, have my name like not nationally known necessarily, but like pretty well known, like the northwestern part of the BMX community, and move on from there. So I've been working on like meeting more people, putting myself out there, getting clips, putting them on Instagram. I'm working on setting up my YouTube channel more for posting like BMX edits and stuff like that, and sort of sharing my journey in BMX.
So you're going for a vlog situation and plus edits, just trying to do edits, or?
At first it was just edits, but I feel like vlogging is something that I'd enjoy doing as well.
We had talked, and you have an interest of coming out this way, and or staying out this way. But your plan is to go back home to Vancouver for a while, then come back out. Like, what is?
Yeah, my plan is to go back out to Vancouver for a few months or so, sort of give myself some time to get situated for a long-term move out here. Packing up all my stuff and making sure stuff is set on the military side of things so that I'm not stressing about being able to make the drive from here to Oregon.
Oh yeah, let's talk about your military.
So throughout high school, whenever the recruiters would come outreach to the high schools, the 2 branches that really stuck out to me as far as what I wanted to commit my life to, and that sort of stuff, was the Army and the Navy. And upon graduating high school, I was sort of just like trying to find a job, trying to like any of that stuff. A lot of places were not hiring, and eventually, about 6 months after I graduated, the Army recruiter came to my door, asked if I wanted to learn more about joining the Army, and so I went over. I sort of went through the process of figuring out, is this something that I want to do, and if it is, what's the best course of action? Do I want to go active duty, reserves? Do I want to something that I can translate into the civilian world for career options? And so upon talking to the recruiters for a few weeks, over the course of a few weeks, I decided that I wanted to go to the reserves, mainly to like ease myself into service instead of just dropping myself right into a unfamiliar territory and feeling lost and all that stuff. So I went into reserves. That way I can still maintain a life on the civilian side and go 1 week in a month, two weeks during the summer, and do my military service. And then once this contract coming to a close, I want to extend it and go active duty. It's a total of a 6-year contract, or it's a 6-year contract with 2 years after that being like an individual select reserve. So being able to like drill on my own time. But once I get to that point, I'm gonna go, instead of going individual select, I'm gonna go full active.
Going into reserves now and then in 6 years, does that put you in a better position when you go full active, or do you start back from square one?
Will put me back a little bit as far as rank and progression throughout my military career, but it's not quite a square one type of thing. Depending on time in rank, I might lose a rank when I go active. Doesn't break the deal for me. It's still something that I want to do, even knowing that I'm gonna lose a little bit of that rank, a little bit of money, but it's something that'll benefit me in the long term.
What's your rank now?
I'm a specialist, E4.
Please explain it to me.
So each rank is, for the enlisted side, designated by E1, E2, E3, E4, all the way up to E10. So when you first join, you first get your uniform, you're getting dropped off at basic training. You're in E1, just a private. Nothing fancy. You don't have an insignia for your rank. After 6 months, you get promoted to private second class, and that's a little mosquito wings. 6 months after that, you get promoted to private first class. Once you get to private first class, you're taking on a little bit more responsibility, not necessarily in the leadership aspect, but light leadership, but more like getting your hands dirty and showing others, like introducing the new people, the people that are privates and private second classes. And then once you're a private first class for 12 months, you get promoted to specialist. And that's when you start taking on a little bit more responsibility, getting yourself prepared for those leadership positions. Once you are an E4, you have to take leadership courses and do training to prepare yourself for the next step, which in most cases will be a corporal, which is still E4, but you are now an NCO, non-commissioned officer. You're taking on like squad leader roles, more people under your wing that you're leading throughout their military experience. Once you're a corporal for a while and you've established a good sense of leadership and your unit feels strongly about moving up the ranks, you move on to E5, sergeant, and then specialist. Everything from there on, corporal, sergeant first class, staff sergeant. All those ranks above are no longer time in service for promotions. They're based on promotion board. So where I'm sitting now as a specialist, I'm working on putting in that training, putting in the experience and the leadership courses to move myself to getting into that promotion board, getting promoted to corporal, sergeant, and then moving my way up.
You're in a leadership role?
I have taken like a smaller sub leadership role, so I'm not quite a squad leader. So the way it works is you got your platoon sergeant is in charge of your platoon. Then you've got squad leaders that are designated to each squad. There's usually like 4 squads or so. And then under the squad leaders, you have fire team leaders, and that's the position that I'm at, managing half of the squad and bridging that gap between the squad members and the squad leader.
Do you feel confident in your leadership?
Yeah. After taking some of the leadership roles, I've been tasked with acting as squad leader for when my squad leader was away for training. So taking on those leadership roles, it was good dropping me into that leadership role, gaining that experience, start figuring out what do I need to work on in practice as I'm filling these leadership roles. I've learned quite a bit, especially from like one-on-one conversations with my squad leader about skills that I need to work on, and gaining knowledge, gaining experience, and building confidence as a leader.
Do you not take what you've learned in the military and execute it in your civilian life? Because you seem to be a very timid person, and that's why I'm getting at that. You don't extrude leadership. Like if I were to pick you out in a crowd, I'm not saying that you can't be a leader, not at all. That's not what I'm getting from you. You seem like a very timid person.
So that more comes from like the fact that in my civilian job at Toyota, I wasn't in a leadership position by any means. I was like the equivalent of like a private or private second class, but on the civilian side. So I was at Toyota, was an express tech. I was doing oil changes and tire rotations, looking over customer cars and seeing, does this need to be done? Does this service need to be done? Is oil leaking? Are the shocks good? Are the tires good? Are the brakes good? And so having so much time in my civilian job in that lower rank per se, hasn't really given me a whole lot of opportunity to bring that leadership stuff from the military into the civilian world. I have been looking for jobs that put me more in a leadership position, not necessarily as a manager or anything, but sort of being able to teach others and help others learn stuff in that aspect of the job, and primarily in like the mechanic field, because that's where I excel, is in mechanics. So because I've been working on cars for like 10, 12 years, nothing crazy, but like helping people like change their tire and stuff like that, and been looking into and been researching the reasoning behind a lot of the mechanics and a lot of the engineering in cars, sort of just grasp an understanding and be able to take that knowledge and help other people. And that's sort of what I'm wanting to look for in my next job, is something where I can lead people to learn more.
Grabbing the bull by its horns in life, right? Like, you've heard that saying.
Yeah.
And then that's basically having confidence in what you're doing, even in a situation where you're not the manager, but being able to take steps and move forward by yourself with confidence. An opportunity for you to do that, because I mean, like I said, like you seem to be very timid in the aspect of when you don't know something, or you not knowing what the person you're working under wants.
Like a lot of this leadership training that I've done in the military has been pretty recent. So right now, I don't feel like I've gotten to the point yet where I can take all this stuff into the real world. I still want to get a little bit more experience on the civilian side, and sort of just get a good handle, be able to look at a certain situation and learn from it, so that if it comes back up again, I have that knowledge and I can help people learn. So it's more of like, I'm still in that stage of figuring out how to transfer what I've learned through military and put it into the civilian side. So that's sort of where a lot of that timidness comes from.
Gotcha. Because it must be pretty easy when everything's so regimented in the military setting, because they don't, I feel, necessarily want somebody to question their authority, their mindset, and what they know, right?
Right.
So they put you in a position to not become a leader, but then they also put you in a position to outshine and kind of push against their box, right?
Yeah.
Because right now you're talking to me very factual. You're not giving me stories. You're not giving me you're just basically answering my questions without putting yourself into the answer. I want to do these interviews because I want to get to know you as a person, or whoever sits in that seat as a person. If I know them already, if I don't, I want to peel back another layer if I already know them, and have a better relationship with them. Because I mean that's a huge thing for me, to have a relationship with somebody. The longer I have a relationship with somebody, the deeper that relationship can be.
Yeah.
I've had this thing inside me where I'm very passionate about, where I want to talk to people. I love talking to people. I love knowing more about them than just what bike they ride or what tricks they know. So this is a huge part of that, and BMX is obviously the doorway to get to know them. Please give me some of yourself into this. We've talked already a handful of times about situations of people you've lost as friendship goes, right?
Yeah.
We've kind of delved into a few other things, and I want to get to know you on that aspect of stuff. But yeah, I mean, do you have stories? I mean, I understand you're a young man and you haven't lived a very large life. Most guys your age usually don't. But I mean, you went to boot camp, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be stories, right? Like you grew up, like we talked about you moving. Did you move into a better situation or a worse situation? I mean, like give me a story.
So, one of my favorite stories that I like telling people about basic training was the fact that when I went to basic training was in March of 2020. This was right when the pandemic was kicking off on this side of the ocean, on this side of the Pacific. And so, like, the first 3 weeks of basic training were pretty normal. It was all like, we get to basic training, we get the shark attack, we have to like be matching the drill sergeant's energy all well. Like, we'd have our bags of all of our stuff over our head, and we'd be running in place. Then we'd have to put it down while still running in place, and then pick it back up, put it back down. Sort of just going through the shark attack, bringing ourselves down to a level to where we're all at that same level, so that the drill sergeants can train us and build us up as a platoon, instead of having to go to each person individually and build them up from where they're already at. So that's what the first 3 weeks of basic training were like. Well, that's more the first 2 weeks. The third week of basic training, we were going through some of the training stuff, like going through the gas chamber with a gas mask, learning how to rappel down walls going to what we called Victory Tower, as a 40-foot wall. And one of my favorite stories with that is, growing up, I've always been afraid of heights. Going through Victory Tower, I mean, the structure was not brand new, it wasn't state of the art or anything like that. Going up on top of this 40-foot wall that is just a wooden wall straight down. There's no angle to it. It's not designed to be easy. Sort of about 3/4 of the way up, I started getting really nervous, and my battle buddies to my left and right were helping keep me cooled down and not panicking. And we get to the top of the tower, and we're going next. We're setting up our ropes to rappel down the wall with. It was all shaky and stuff like that, and so it comes down to leaning back and getting yourself completely perpendicular to the wall. One thing that I ended up learning the hard way was you want to keep your legs straight. And so as we were leaning back, there's this lip about 4 inches out from the wall, and you hook your heel onto it, and you're like pivoting on your heel to where you're perpendicular to the wall so that you can rappel down. I grasp onto the rope to keep me from falling down this 40-foot wall, and slammed my knee into the wall, because essentially what had happened is I did that sort of thing, so I just hit the wall. I'm not entirely sure how I was able to do it, but I was able to get myself back into that where I'm pretty much standing on the wall and started rappelling down. The first jump I ended up slipping again, and I was able to get myself back into that position, and then I like 8 jumps. Most people were doing it like 5 or 6 jumps. And so when I got to the bottom of that rappel tower, I was proud of myself for making it. Like, yeah, I had some stuff come up towards the beginning of rappelling down this wall, but I was able to overcome it and get a good grasp on rappelling. Being able to overcome that, it helped me get over my fear of heights. Rappel tower again, I would be able to ace it, knowing from experience now. But what was funny is the morning after, everyone got called into formation at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and the drill sergeants gave us the news that we were going under lockdown because of COVID. A lot of the other basic training units were, their soldiers were testing positive for COVID. Nobody in my basic training unit had tested positive, but post-wide, we were all under lockdown for training until further notice. I mean, this was the very beginning of the pandemic. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew what this was going to turn into. So we pretty much just did nothing for 3 weeks. The lockdown was strict enough that we couldn't. The drill sergeants couldn't force us to do PT. Like, they couldn't smoke us, make us do workouts as punishment for like the whole play stupid games, win stupid prizes type of thing. Like, if you fell out of line, most of the time you would have to do like push-ups. That's where the whole drop and give me 20 comes from, that a lot of people have heard. We weren't able to do that because we were under a training lockdown, and it was like a complete lockdown. Like, started going through like emotional stress and really wanting to like communicate with our families and stuff like that, but we didn't really have that opportunity to, because even though training was locked down, we were still trainees, and we still had to have that discipline. But 3 weeks after we went into that lockdown, we were able to pick training back up again. So we started back with the training. We were going to the range and getting all that, like trying to catch up on all the training we'd missed. And in that time, in that 3 weeks of being in lockdown, I think overall helped our platoon sort of grow to be able to work with each other, and it made like the rest of training feel a lot better, being able to rely on our battle buddies and stuff like that. So we ended up graduating basic training a week after we were scheduled to. 9 weeks we had to shove 6 weeks of training into 4 weeks. Overall, we all handled it pretty well. I handled it pretty well. I had my ups and downs throughout the lockdown, but in the end, I feel like we definitely came out ahead.